Greetings to us and welcome to another video. So we're very close to what is a transition between Phantom Nightmare era and what's going to be Legacy of Destruction era. Also, we're extremely close by the time of this recording to the sentence that is going to be given out in the OCG regarding the next Forbidden Unlimited list. I feel like I kind of want to talk about the true definition behind this format because there has been a small debate whether or not the Snake Eye strategy is a tier 0 strategy. There are some claims that involved like YCS tops and YCS wins, where it kind of shows you that the deck is overperforming and dominating. But if you see from regional standpoints, you can see that the Snake Eye Fire King deck is not as dominant, if dominant at all. Like, for example, we here have 20 decks that are shown. Not all of these are winning deck lists. These are like some top 4s, top 8s, and one or two winners. But out of these 20 decks, and these are all different regionals, they're not like the same regionals. Uh, 10 out of these 20 decks are the Snake Eye deck, or a Snake Eye hybrid or strategy. Meaning that despite the deck being like super dominant and being like a pretty dominant force, it is not like uh it's not being shown at the regional level as if it was a tier 0 strategy. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. uh I feel like we're in what I want to call a gatekeeper format. What does a gatekeeper format mean? A gatekeeper format means where you have a deck that is over centralizing the metagame, and you pretty much have to respect that strategy or literally dedicate your strategy into defeating that deck or having it as this highest priority. One example I can give from this is when Drytron was like one of the better decks in the format. When Drytrons debuted back in late 2020, start of 2021, this deck was extremely represented. This deck was very highly respected as well, and people really needed to like look into this deck in order to like make sure it did not dominate the metagame. Just not preparing for Drytron or not having it on your radar meant that you were just going to like lose out to ultimateness. You were just going to get blown out by this deck, and it was going to like dominate and over centralize the metagame. During TOS format, we had Thundergrand Colossus. This card was a very like enraging card to deal against. This card pretty much like made people forced to build their mains and their side decks or decide to play a specific strategy in order to not lose to the floodgate effect that this card was performing. Goki is another example of this. Back when Topologic Gumblar came into the game, there was pretty much a format where Gumblar was like a game deciding strategy, and if you didn't respect Goki, you were just going to lose out on turn 0 to this deck just because of the existence of Gumblar Dragon. Gatekeeper formats also applies to tier 0 decks. So Spiral is another deck that you really have to build your deck around. If you didn't build your deck to beat Spiral, you were just going to lose out to Spiral, even after the first wave of hits that it received on November of 2017. The Adamancipator deck is an example I already gave on a previous video. I pretty much mentioned how the Snake Eye Fire King deck was very close to this deck when this deck was dominating, despite us being in not on like not online not online meta. Uh, this deck was very dominant to the point where Konami was forced to ban Block Dragon before we actually had real Konami sanctioned events. Uh, I don't think I need to explain tier elements. Uh, but I will talk about tier elements a little bit because I feel like tier elements prior to the Ichizu cards was a very, very respected strategy. And if you were not building your deck around tier elements, you were just going to lose out to tier elements like 9 out of 10. The deck was very adaptive. It was very powerful. It had a lot of tools in its arsenal. Like to this day, still feel like the strategy is still strong despite the many hits that the deck has received. So, what does this mean? I guess the last example would be a Rise Heart. Uh, when Kashtira was the most dominant deck, it, the Kashtira strategy was a strategy that people had already good like sighting patterns for, but it is a deck that if you did not respect and you actually was ignoring, this deck was just going to over centralize the metagame. You had this extremely annoying boss monster that just decided the duel, um, and it was pretty much like quote unquote gatekeeping the format. But yeah, like if you see for a few examples that I'm gonna show, like here you see like the Snake Eye strategy facing against Branded. Like Branded is just a very strong deck, and they pretty much can almost play through the level of interruptions that the Snake Eye deck can do, and can also provide you with like a way to just make sure your opponent does not do well with its follow up. That's why you see like Sanctifier and like Gimme Puppet. Pure Kashtira is just another example. Pretty much another strategy, and as you can see here from like the graveyard, they're playing Inscription, which is just a very strong card against like the Snake Eye strategy in itself. Like if we talk about power level, the power level of Snake Eye is way higher than Kashtira. However, Kashtira as a strategy uh, does have a few like advantages that it can makes it so it can perform over Snake Eye, and it can play a lot of silver bullet cards like Dimension Shifter, Gatekeeper's Inscription, Number 76, just to give you a few examples. Here you see the Horus like Vanities ruler deck. This is pretty much like a stun strategy, and like I don't think I need to explain how strong Vanity's Fiend is like against a combo deck like Snake Eye. You pretty much have to make sure that you have the right tools to actually combat this strategy. And then you see, and then you get to a point where the most top rated duels are people not playing the Snake Eye deck, but they're playing decks that actually can fare well against that if you have like the right tools. Uh, like Bestial Branded or Bestial Runic, Branded Bestial as well. Stuff like Runic Stun, just to give you other examples. Like you see Flow on the Reese over here. We're playing DDG. You see that Voiceless Voice is a winner, like from a regional. And if we look at the Voiceless Voice deck, you can just see like they have a lot of hand traps. They have a good amount of board breakers. If you look at the side deck, they have like a cards that just really help against the matchup. So a strong implication of what this means is that I feel like out of tier zero strategies that we've had in the game, this is one of the weakest ones, but it's very close to the margin between what's tier zero and what is a gatekeeper deck. A really good example of this is like Kashtira. I feel like if Kashtira did not have the really big weaknesses that it had, like losing to like board breakers, this would probably be a tier zero deck. However, since it had one very glaring weakness, a lot of people just respected that weakness and they were doing well with their non Kashtira strategy. Uh, However, uh, that was still null and void because essentially what it meant is that Castira was going to always be a dominant force if you did not play the right cards for it. But yeah, this has been like my explanation or like what I can mostly define of this format. I feel like if you are going to play in this format, you should really just respect this deck. Just respect the Snake Eye strategy. You can do well even with rogue decks, but you really have to know what you're doing. You really have to be playing the right cards, and just knowing is half the battle when it comes to strategies like this one. I think that if you're not playing at a very high level tournament like YCS, you should be watching out for rogue decks more than this because more people will be inclined into playing non tier 0 ish decks. However, in a very huge tournament setting or in a tournament where you know there are going to be high caliber players, you should really make sure that you have a strategy that is teched out to be a little bit, if not marginable, against the Fire King strategy. But I hope you found this video informative and to your liking your understanding. Uh, by the time this upload occurs, this will probably be my last upload before talking about whatever changes happens in the OCG, as well as uh, my next deck report. Following next week, I'll be starting talking about Legacy of Destruction a lot more than what I'm currently doing because we're pretty much 1 month away from that set being released, which means a lot of new strategies that are coming into the game, and depending on what Konami's business decisions are, it could define our next format. But until then, keep practicing and keep dueling.